Well, me hearties, we're continuing with Chapter 17 of Treasure Island. The narrative is continued by the Doctor, called The Jolly Boat's Last Trip. You'll remember a jolly boat is a rowboat about 15 feet long that they use to carry and do chores about the ship. This chapter is also being told just by the Doctor, Dr. Livesey, and the characters in it include Dr. Livesey, Squire Trelawney, Captain Smollett, and some of his servants and some of the sailors. This fifth trip was quite different from any of the others. In the first place, the little galley-pot of a boat that we were in was gravely overloaded. 5 grown men, and 3 of them, Trelawney, Redruth, and the captain, over 6 feet high, was already more than she was meant to carry. Add to that the powder, pork, and bread bags. The gunwale was lipping astern, meaning the edge of the boat was almost underwater. Several times we shipped a little water, and my breeches, his pants, and the tail of my coat were all soaking wet before we had gone 100 yards. The captain made us trim the boat, and we got her to lie a little more evenly. All the same, we were afraid to breathe. In the second place, the ebb was now making. A strong, rippling current running westward through the basin, and then southward and seaward down the straits by which we had entered in the morning. Even the ripples were a danger to our overloaded craft, but the worst of it was that we were swept out of our true course and away from our proper landing place behind the point. If we let the current have its way, we should come ashore beside the gigs, where the pirates might appear at any moment. "I cannot keep her head for the stockade, sir," said I, Dr. Livesey, to the captain. I was steering, while he and Redruth, 2 fresh men, were at the oars. "The tide keeps washing her down. Could you pull a little stronger?" Meaning, could you row a little harder? "Not without swamping the boat," said he. "You must bear up, sir, if you please. Bear up until you see you're gaining." I tried, and found by experiment that the tide kept sweeping us westward until I had laid her head due east, or just about right angles to the way we ought to go. Meaning they wanted to go this way, but he had to aim the boat this way, because the tide was pushing them that way. That way. "We'll never get ashore at this rate," said I. "If it's the only course that we can lie, sir, we must even lie it," returned the captain. "We must keep upstream. You see, sir," he went on, if once we drop to leeward of the landing place, it's hard to say where we should get ashore, besides the chance of being boarded by the gigs, by the other boats that the pirates had. Whereas the way we go, the current must slacken, and then we can dodge back along the shore." "The current's less already, sir," said the man Gray, who was sitting in the foresheets. "You can ease her off a bit." "Thank you, my man," said I, quite as if nothing had happened, for we had all quietly made up our minds to treat him like one of ourselves. He had been one of the good men who had gone over to the pirates for a while, but was convinced by Captain Smollett to come back. Suddenly the captain spoke up again, and I thought his voice was a little changed. "The gun," said he. I have thought of that, said I, for I made sure he was thinking of a bombardment of the fort. Meaning the cannon would start shooting at the fort. They could never get the gun ashore, and if they did, they could never haul it through the woods. Look astern, Doctor, replied the captain. We had entirely forgotten the long 9. Now, the long 9 is a cannon. The 9 means it shot a 9-pound cannonball. That's a iron ball about 3 inches across. Pretty good size. If it hits you, you'd know it. And there, to our horror, were the 5 rogues busy about her. Those are the 5 men left on the ship who were with the pirates and had been left on the ship to guard the ship while the rest went ashore. They were getting off her jacket, as they called the stout tarpaulin cover under which she sailed. That is to say, they put the cannon underneath a canvas protector, like a big sheet over it. Not only that, but it flashed into my mind at the same moment that the round shot and the powder for the gun had been left behind, and a stroke with an axe would put it all into the possession of the evil ones aboard. Israel was Flint's gunner, said Gray hoarsely. Israel Hand, he was the coxswain, you'll recall, and he was one of the pirates who had sailed with Captain Flint. And he was his gunner, meaning he was a cannoneer. He knew how to fire and aim a cannon on a ship which might be moving about in the current or in the waves. At any risk, we put the boat's head direct for the landing place. By this time, we'd got so far out of the run of the current that we kept steerage way even at our necessarily gentle rate of rowing, and I could keep her steady for the goal. But the worst of it was that with the course I now held, we turned our broadside instead of our stern to the Hispaniola and offered a target like a barn door. The broadside of the boat is the long length of the boat. The stern is just a small area at the back of the boat. Be a harder shot to hit, a harder target. I could hear as well as see that brandy-faced rascal Israel Hands plumping down a round shot on the deck. He was putting down the cannonball on the deck. Who's the best shot? Asked the captain. Mr. Trelawney out and away, said I. Mr. Trelawney, will you please pick me off one of these men, sir? Hands, if possible, said the captain. Trelawney was as cool as steel. He looked to the priming of his gun. Now, cried the captain, easy with that gun, sir, or you'll swamp the boat. All hands stand by to trim her when he aims. The squire raised his gun, the rowing ceased, and we leaned over to the other side to keep the balance, and all was so nicely contrived that we did not ship a drop, meaning no water got into the boat. They had the gun by this time slewed round upon the swivel, and Hands, who was at the muzzle with the rammer, was in consequence the most exposed. However, we had no luck, for just as Trelawney fired, down he stooped, the ball whistled over him, and it was one of the other 4 who fell. The cry he gave was echoed not only by his companions on board, but by a great number of voices from the shore, and looking in that direction I saw the other pirates trooping out from among the trees and tumbling into their places in the boats. Here come the gigs, sir, said I. Give way, then, cried the captain. We mustn't mind if we swamp her now. If we can't get ashore, all's up. Only one of the gigs is being manned, sir, I added. The crew of the other most likely going round by shore to cut us off. They'll have a hot run, sir, returned the captain. Jack's ashore, you know. It's not them I mind, it's the round shot. The cannon. Carpet bowls. My lady's maid couldn't miss. Tell us, squire, when you see the match, and we'll hold water. Now what he's saying, carpet bowls is like bowling on a carpet, meaning it's a very easy thing. You roll the ball down and you can't miss. And his lady's maid couldn't miss, meaning a little girl taking care, or an old lady taking care of my lady, couldn't miss. That was such an easy shot. The match is what they used to light the powder on the cannon. Remember, this is 250 years ago and things were a little different. In the meanwhile, we'd been making headway at a good pace for a boat so overloaded, and we had shipped but little water in the process. We were now close in, 30 or 40 strokes, and we should beach her, for the ebb had already disclosed a narrow belt of sand below the clustering trees. The tide was going out, and the water level in the lagoon there was dropping, so that a sandbar that had been underwater when the tide was in is now shown when the tide is out. The gig was no longer to be feared. The little point had already concealed it from our eyes. The ebb tide, which had so cruelly delayed us, was now making reparation and delaying our assailants. The one source of danger was the gun. If I durst, said the captain, I'd stop and pick off another man. But it was plain that they meant nothing should delay their shot. They never so much as looked at their fallen comrade, though he was not dead, and I could see him trying to crawl away. Ready, cried the squire. Hold, cried the captain, quick as an echo. And he and Redruth backed with a great heave that sent her stern bodily under water. They backed the ship up, the rowboat up. The stern of the boat went under water. The report of the cannon fell in at the same instant of time. This was the first that Jim heard, the sound of the squire's shot not having reached him. Where the ball passed, not one of us precisely knew, but I fancy it must have been over our heads, and that the wind of it may have contributed to our disaster. At any rate, the boat sank by the stern quite gently in 3 feet of water, leaving the captain and myself facing each other on our feet. The other 3 took complete headers and came up again drenched and bubbling. They fell into the water. So far there was no great harm. No lives were lost, and we could wade ashore in safety. But there were all our stores at the bottom, and to make things worse, only 2 guns out of 5 remained in a state for service. Mine I had snatched from my knees and held over my head by a sort of instinct. As for the captain, he'd carried his over his shoulder by a bandolier, and like a wise man, lock uppermost. The other 3 had gone down with the boat. To add to our concern, we heard voices already drawing near us in the woods along shore, and we had not only the danger of being cut off from the stockade in our half-crippled state, but the fear before us whether, if Hunter and Joyce were attacked by half a dozen, they would have the sense and conduct to stand firm. Hunter was steady, that we knew. Joyce was a doubtful case, a pleasant, polite man for a valet, and to brush one's clothes, but not entirely fitted for a man-of-war. With all this in our minds, we waded ashore as fast as we could, leaving behind us the poor jolly boat and a good half of all our powder and provisions, not to mention 3 guns under water. That's the end of chapter 17. We'll take it up later.